Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guest today is Henry Barajas. He is a writer and he works for Top Cow in California. Henry, welcome to Comic Culture.
Hey, it's good to be here.
So let's just talk a little bit about what you do. You are a writer and you have some interesting work out there, but you also work for Top Cow, and I'm wondering what your role is there and how that factors into you making comics.
Yes, I work for Top Cow Productions. It's within the Image Comics family. It was founded by Mark Silvestri, and it's famous for Witchblade, Darkness. Wanted was once a movie that had featured Angelina Jolie. So I am the director of operations there. I work directly with the retail, comic book stores, libraries. I do social media, PR, and I do some, just little everyday things at the office. And I travel the convention circuit and also manage and help set up and tear down the booths. So whenever you see a Top Cow booth, it's usually me and Elena Salcedo there. So yeah, I do a lot of everything. Thankfully, I've had the opportunity to start writing more stuff for Top Cow. I have been writing and self-publishing comics for the last 10 years. So it's nice to finally do it with a place that I have always respected and cherished my entire reading life.
It's interesting also because you are doing the stuff that we don't necessarily think of when we talk about working in comics. You're combining your own writing of comics with some of that administrative work, and I'm wondering what prepares you for talking to distributors or making sure that there's a copy of something in a library so that a kid can pick up a book and get inspired for the next generation of creators.
For the last couple of years, I've been with Top Cow going on 3 years now, and I never really thought about the library market because I've always got my comics at comic book stores, and before that, it used to be at gas stations, off the rack. So comic books and libraries were always never one and one. So I've been doing a lot of shows, and lately I've been meeting a lot of librarians. At the end of last year, there was a digital library con where a lot of all of the major comic book publishers had basically sent their books and information to librarians that just logged on and were talking about comics, doing a lot of web seminars. So I also get a lot of emails from librarians asking for free stuff. And I started talking to their patrons and realizing that they would get a free comic, but they couldn't go back to their library and check out that book. So I've been a little bit more proactive about talking with librarians and making sure that the books I send them, they actually read and include in their catalog so that they can go back and read these books. And the comic book direct market is always changing and it's always adjusting. And with the economy right now going up, there's a lot of different factors that are kind of, working against comic book stores that they wouldn't normally try something like a creator-owned idea. They'll be more inclined to get like a Batman or a Superman or a Wonder Woman, which is I encourage that, and I really want comic book stores to stay around. So do what you got to do to stay in business. So, there's a bit of an uphill battle when you're trying to push a comic book that isn't on television or that isn't on Netflix. So librarians don't have that kind of quota, or they don't have a lot writing on them. They have funding, and they try to buy what they can and also buy things that their patrons will appreciate. And they have a little bit more time to read more comics, or they have a little bit more time to talk to me one-on-one because they don't have to man a store 7 days a week and work with Diamond on a daily basis. So it's just a new kind of thing for me, which I'm really grateful for, to have the opportunity to talk to people that are so enthusiastic about comics, whether they be retailers or librarians. So there is a bit of a culture shift right now with librarians taking more of a chance on comics because they normally would only get what's on television or get what's on the big screen because that's all they know. But since comics in itself are becoming more of a common thing within Hollywood. So now they're trying to keep up with what is being optioned and what's being interested in, so that people can actually read these books before they hit the theaters.
It's funny too, because if you talk to people about comics, they immediately assume you're talking about superhero comics. And comics is a medium to tell stories, much the same way that film can be a comedy, it could be an action adventure, it could be romance, it could be a drama. And I know that the comics that you personally write aren't necessarily falling into that superheroic. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the type of stories that you tell and how you go about, putting that into a visual medium.
I have been working on a comic called La Voz De M.A.Y.O, Tata Rambo. It's about my great-grandfather, Ramon Jauregue. Growing up, I used to call him Tata Rambo because he was a World War II veteran who fought in Okinawa and was someone that was very respected in my family and the community. And my family always told me that he did such great things, but they never really got into detail. And the journalist in me, and then just the curious mind, just was always kind of frustrated with that. So I decided to dig deep and find out what he actually did. And I found out a lot of things that he had accomplished. He helped the Pasco Yaqui tribe become recognized under the Carter administration in the 1970s. He led a movement to stop the city of Tucson from bulldozing their neighborhood and taking their land to build the Interstate 10. He also helped open a low-cost clinic that offered contraceptives and birth control to the very poor neighborhood that he lived in and fought for. Originally, this was going to be a prose novel, but I read John Lewis's March, and I realized that I'd been in comics for so long and that I really want to make comics, and it never seemed possible to me until March came out. So it just influenced me in a way where I felt like, duh, like I should be doing this. But I was in journalism. I was a journalist at the Arizona Daily Star and the Tucson Weekly, so I was just so automatically going to prose at the time. So I started working at Top Cow. My boss, Matt Hawkins, was really interested in what I was doing, and he paired me up with Jay Gonzo, who I've known because he lives in Phoenix. And we just started collaborating together, and we made something really special that was, we kickstarted it. We got it out to 350 people. And, that's the kind of thing that I like about Kickstarter, is that comic book stores probably wouldn't normally take a chance on something like this because it's about natives, it's about Mexicans, it's not a big market for them or for anybody really. I mean, it's just something that no one's really doing, and I can do this in a very sustained environment where I'm only printing what I need to get the book out to people that really want it. So before that, I worked on the Where We Live anthology that was curated by J.H. and Wendy Williams. They had got a lot of industry friends of theirs like Neil Gaiman, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Brian Michael Bendis. They all did stories for this anthology that was meant to help the Route 91 charity to help the people that were affected by the mass shooting in Las Vegas 2 years ago. So yeah, I've kind of found this groove in writing comics where I'm writing about real things that directly affect me, people I love, and my political ideals. And I never thought that would happen, but it's kind of a blessing,
You sent me a sample of Tata Rambo, and the one thing I was just struck with was not only was the story really fascinating, but the art style is so different than what we would normally expect in a mainstream comic. And I'm just wondering how much of that is just the artist being brilliant, and how much of that is the two of you collaborating to discuss how the color palette should be, or how this crowd scene should look in terms of the backdrop and all that other good stuff.
Thank you for the kind words. Jay Gonzo is really the genius. I mean, my only color note was, I want this to look like a Tucson sunset. And I don't know if you've ever been to Arizona or you've seen the Arizona flag, but it's the sunset. And it's the most beautiful thing you could ever see, in my opinion. So I told him, I want this to look like a Tucson sunset. And he took that and he ran with it. He used his favorite color palette that really encapsulated Hispanic, Latinx culture, who also honor the Native Americans that we are discussing, because a lot of this is about respect, and a lot of this is about the people that have been omitted from history, and we wanted to make them shine in a way that you would never recognize. So I give my hat is off to Gonzo on his incredible style of art and color palette.
And again, what's really fascinating about this book is that, you deliver slice of life stuff, and your protagonist is so everyday, but at the same time, he's extraordinary because he's willing to take on the responsibility in his community. And this is something that I think a lot of us could probably, find some story that we want to tell, but wouldn't necessarily think that it's a comic story. So how do you take this prose that you've been working on and adapt it towards a visual medium? How do you go about that script writing and making it so that an artist can put pen down and get your ideas so that we can see them?
I've been a student of comics for the last, 10 years. I've been really like practicing writing my own comics, self-publishing books that no one will ever know or read about. But what I wanted to do was take what my great-grandfather had written and put myself in the room and kind of make it come alive. And I've learned a lot from Brian Michael Bendis's teachings. He once did a class out in Atomic Comics in Phoenix. It was like a 3-hour class for $50. He just started teaching in Portland, and I will never forget what he has taught me from that. Also learning from John Suntress's Word Balloon podcast with interviews like Kelly Sue and Matt Fraction. You just kind of, and you just hear about their methods, and they're all gracious enough to answer your questions on Twitter and publish a lot of what they know and how they make comics. So I've just been stealing from my favorite artists and writers, but using those tools and those mechanics to tell a story that no one knows about. Not a lot of people in Tucson know about how the Yaquis were recognized, how the freeway was moved from where people were going to have lived or where they had founded and really just started their lives to where a dump was, So I just wanted to use everything that I've learned within journalism, telling the truth, citing my sources. In the digital book that I sent you, there's about 40 pages of back matter that really shows where I got my information and how this has come from a level of truth. A lot of the information that I was told was oral, and that's how natives and Hispanics really kind of part their information, is orally. So it was just my method of my love for comics, my time in journalism, and my need to honor natives in my family.
It's true. There are about 40 pages of newspaper clippings and letters and other ancillary items. And I'm wondering, as a journalist, this is something that we would expect someone to do when they're researching a story. But as a writer trying to tell a biographical story, this is a lot of work and a lot of effort. So I'm wondering, how long were you just spending poring over all these documents, going to the library, and going on the internet and trying to find all this information?
I spent 3 years. 3 years of going to libraries, going to the University of Arizona, just hounding Congressman Raul Grijalva for an interview because he was there, when he was a kid in high school. He worked with my great-grandfather. I wanted to talk to somebody who was, respected and who had a level of, of history that I would never have. I actually walked through the neighborhood in the Yaqui neighborhood where my great-grandfather lived and where he helped, he was the adult director of education at the elementary school that helped people, get a better education, to get better jobs. So it was just beautiful for me to go into people's homes and sit down and listen to stories about how he helped them buy their home and how they got a job because of him. So it was just, I felt like I had my great-grandfather's voice in my head and his intentions in my heart. And we're coming to the end of the production of the book, and we're all like, me and my artist, Jay Gonzo, are kind of like, oh man, this is going to end soon. So things are getting kind of real. And I've been afraid to end this chapter in my life because I feel like I'm telling my great-grandfather a final goodbye, because he's not as often in my thoughts. So, I mean, I'm ready to go on and tell more stories and have a lot of fun making comics, but part of me is little sad that this is coming to an end.
But that's, I guess, that's part of the joy of the creative process, is that you work on something, you love it, that's what makes you want to do it. And then when it's time to finally share it with the world, there's that bittersweet moment where you do have to say goodbye because that story is told. But you do have that document that's with you forever, and that's always that great satisfaction. Right. So let's just change gears just a little bit. You mentioned Kickstarter, and I'm wondering, you mentioned social media and a lot of the creators that are on social media. How do you use social media? Because I'm imagining that's going to help you get people to back your project, so that way you can, pay for things like production and get that book into their hands. So how do you do that Kickstarter?
So Kickstarter, I think, is one of the biggest blessings to indie comics, because it's really hard as a minority Hispanic man, cis man, to get a job in comics. There's a lot of, I don't know why, but I've found a lot of opposition in that. So with Kickstarter, I could just do whatever I want. I just post it, and people either dig it or they don't. And I've been published in many anthologies thanks to Kickstarter. There's a new comics, I guess, I don't know, curator, or I forget what her title is at Kickstarter. Her name is Camilla, but she helped me forge my Kickstarter, gave me some notes, things I didn't think about, rewards, and trying to figure out ways to make this as profitable and successful as possible. So Kickstarter is one of those things that, just as there's a lot that goes into it. There's fees, there's shipping costs, there's it's a 30-day run. It's like a 30-day marathon that you're just like watching. You watch it go up and you watch it stagnate, and it's just very stressful. But if it's successful, it really helps you in a way that you either had to take a loan out or kind of do a little bit more high risk financial decisions. So I had ran a 30-day Kickstarter, and thankfully everyone who had pledged has gotten all their rewards. And it's just one of those things where there's just a lot that goes into it. And if you can enroll any help you can, I suggest people do that. With social media, I've been doing social media for 10 years. A lot of it is just me telling jokes, me having fun, me showing a side of myself that I can't normally voice in public. I just have a good time with it, and I think people can see that level of authenticity where I've never been anything that I'm not. Everything I've written on social media, everything I've published, has been in my name. So you can find me and everything I do and everything I've said, and you could see my slant in politics and my slant in socialist issues. So I think social media has been a blessing for me, because I raise the most money on Facebook. As much as I don't appreciate Facebook as a corporation or the practices that they've been using the last couple of years, but it has really afforded me the ability to make comics. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. I also made another big portion on Twitter, which is a very big comics like bar or comics coffee shop where people just drop in and they just talk about what they're working on, share their practices, have a lot of advice. So I'm really grateful for Facebook and the Latinx community that really backed me. Some of the retailers like Brave New World, Mysterious Galaxy Books, Charlie's Comics, Heidi Ho Comics, they all were brick and mortar stores that are friends of mine that got my book in their stores without having to deal with Diamond or deal with the traditional distribution models. So because of all of that work, it really has been able to give me a platform to tell a story that has never been told, and a kind of story that you can't find elsewhere.
It is kind of a liberation of sorts, because you see, mainstream comics has a particular flavor, and that's what they want to deliver. And at some point, your favorite artist from 10 years ago is no longer working in the medium. And you see a lot of folks now are able to use Kickstarter to tell stories because they still have that passion. So you get someone who maybe they're known for a run 20 years ago on some, superhero book, but now they're doing what they wanted to do, and Kickstarter kind of affords them that. So you mentioned a little bit about dealing directly with retailers. So how does someone like yourself just get to know all these retailers? I mean, outside of the work that you do with Top Cow, how would you sort of get to know different retailers? Is it just that you go to their shops and shop there, or you just make a conscious effort to sort of network?
it's basically, I mean, if I were to start all over again, the biggest thing that's happening within the Facebook and comic book retail market is that they're doing live Facebook um, videos where they sell comics, which is really interesting to me. And that's like the best way to talk to a retailer at this moment because they're like home network style selling books live and sending them to people directly, but selling books in a way that those comics would have sat in a long box or in a short box, and now they're getting it out in a way that you know that no one's ever really thought of. So right now, if you can't afford the opportunity to go to numerous conventions, like where there's Comics Pro, where Diamond has a retailer summits, that's one of the best places to meet a lot of retailers at once because they go to these shows to get rare comics, get free stuff, meet the publishers, and talk about what they're experiencing, talking about what they like and what they don't like, and that is the best way to actually go face to face without having to go to individual comic book stores. But I was really lucky because I became friends with Charlie Harris, who owns Charlie's Comics. He's the one that gave me my first San Diego Comic Con badge. He's the one that got me in touch with other retailers that he was friends with and is friends with. So, the comic book retail market is a very small industry. So a lot of people know each other. So it really just, it's you getting on the ground and kind of having that grassroots type of political agenda to get your name out there and get your books out there.
And let me just ask another question, because I know with traditional comic publishers, if you're owning a comic shop, you have to purchase those comics ahead of time, and that's it. You keep them whether or not you sell them to a customer. You're making that investment. Is this something where you're able to give them, give retailers a book maybe on consignment, where if it sells, they're going to give you money, or I'm just wondering how that works without getting into exact figures, but just how that would work for a small publisher, a self-publisher such as yourself.
So with luckily with me, they know that I probably couldn't afford to refund them or send them back books, or because there are programs that retailers get to opt into where they can order a certain amount and they have a certain percentage of returnability. But my goal was to reach out to these retailers, let them know this book is coming, and have their customers kind of pre-order in a way where they're already sold the books. They're not ordering more than they need, basically. And within Los Angeles, I'm very fortunate that LA has a very vibrant comics community where I can go to these stores, deliver their books, do a signing, either sell half or all the books, and they've made their money back and then some.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're currently working on that we can expect in the coming months.
I'm working on some stuff like just a lot more creator-owned comics. I'm working on a book called La Loca. It's about this private investigator who has to find the killer of her uncle within the Mexican border. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, so the border is only an hour away from me, and it's kind of something that's been with me my whole life. And a lot of people don't know the types of struggles that these migrant people go through to get to the United States. Whatever their intentions are, it's not an easy stroll. And being a journalist, the Arizona Daily Star, having to work with the PIO, the press officers at Border Patrol, like they would send us pictures of bodies that were bloated and sunburnt, and you just kind of got a glimpse of the Mexican border that you don't see anywhere else. So this is definitely a passion project of mine that I'm really excited to get started on. That's going to go into production after Tata Rambo is finished. Tata Rambo, La Voz De M.A.Y.O is supposed to be out the first week of November, but you can get the digital copy through me, and I'm doing some mail orders personally because I ordered extras so I can be able to keep the book out and let people know. But yeah, that's definitely one that La Loca is something that I'm really excited to work on.
And this is not, again, this is another style of story that one can tell with comics. And just, you know, given the fact that most people are thinking of the superheroics and you're doing a detective story, is there an advantage for you as a writer, and we only have about a minute or so left, is there an advantage for you as a writer writing in comics rather than trying to write it as a prose, just because it's an interesting visual story?
Yeah, because what I love about the comic book medium is that I can have the inner monologue that I love in prose, and I also have the visual cues that you can't do in prose. Like in a play, you know, there are things that are done on stage that you can't hear, but you can only see. And that's the beautiful thing about comics, is that you're telling a story with literature and art, and the two married together, in my opinion, is so much fun, and it's giving me goosebumps just thinking about it.
If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they find you on the web?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Henry Barajas or Henry J. Barajas. You can find me in any one of those social media platforms, telling jokes and posting pictures of my food and just having a good time and promoting my comics.
All right, well, Henry, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us today. Thank you at home for watching Comic Culture. We will see you again soon. Comic Culture is a production of the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke.